Hello, my name is Gianni Nicolini, and I'm an associate professor of finance at the University of Rome, Tor Vergata, in Rome, Italy. First of all, I want to thank you, the IAFICO organization, for the invitation, and say that I'm really glad to be here with you today. Today, I will talk about financial literacy, financial education, and payment cards. So credit cards, debit cards, and prepaid cards. And especially referring to financial frauds, so scams that involve somehow those kind of payment tools. Let me share my presentation. And okay. So the title of my presentation is Financial Fraud on Payment Cards, the Role of Financial Literacy and Financial Education. Let me start with some data from the industry. Why credit cards? Why payment cards? Payment cards is a growing market because in 2017 we had 2.1 billion cards in the US. We have 812 million cards, active cards in Europe, and 6.6 billion cards in China. But it's not just the size of the market, but is a growing trend that make this area quite interesting from an academic point of view, because we can see how we have 200 million new cars in the US from 2017 to 2019, and we have more than 1 billion new cars in China in a single year from 2017 to 2018. Generally speaking, the percentage rate of this market growth are pretty high. But even the number of transactions is something that matters, because we can have many cards and use only a few times a month, or we can have a single card and use many times a day. The number of transactions in 2018 in the US was 131.2 billion. The same number in Europe was 69.2 billion, and we had 210.3 billion transactions in China in the same year. So we have a market that is quite exposed to frauds, because once you have so many cards and so many transactions, this is something quite interesting for fraudster. And data that are not available for China, but say that in the US we had $6.11 billion losses for frauds on credit and debit cards. The same number in euro was 1.8 billion euro. That with the current exchange rate is not so different. And the weight, the role, the relevance of this number is even more clear when we refer to the percentage for the total transaction. In the case of credit cards in the US, we have that 0.17% of the total value has been victimized in terms of be victim of a fraud, and this 0.17 is compared with 0.11 in the European Union. For debit cards, percentage are lower because we have 0.09% in the US, but compared with 0.02% in Europe, the big picture say that the number of fraud, but even the relevance of fraud for the market is much more severe in the US than Europe. If we refer to Europe, data from 2017 say that we have more than 30 million frauds on credit cards, and almost the same because we have 28.7 million frauds for debit cards. But what is really interesting, what is really somehow even shocking, is the growing trend, because in only 4 years we have an increase beyond 100% in the number of frauds in both debit and credit cards. Why financial frauds are so relevant? Can be explained by different point of view. A financial fraud is relevant for the user. The victim of the fraud will lose their money, so we have a money theft. But at the same time, there are other economic side effects, like the time and money needed to establish the identity and the credit standing, or the loss to of access to credit due to the deterioration of your credit score because you have been victim of a fraud. And there are even other non-economic, non-financial effects, like a psychological effect that can push you in a state of anxiety or depression. Of course, those effects are bigger when the amount of the loss are bigger. And it's not only referred to credit card, but are even more severe when we deal with investment fraud. The issuer is another victim because the issuer can be negatively affected for the loss of reputation and the negative effect on the brands. And it can even be financially affected for the cost of to deactivate scam site and reset password, as even the company stock price that can be affected. We can just refer to the case of some hackers that just stolen data for credit cards, and this is something that can make the stock price plummet in a single trading day. The seller is another possible victim of the fraud because he can lose money, but he has even to pay for the cost of fraud detecting technologies, and there are even the hidden costs related with the missing profit from denying suspicious but valid transaction. So it's all the market that is affected by those kind of frauds. If we had to summarize the motivation of the study, the first point was the relevance of payment card fraud for the payment card market. So it's something relevant for the market. It's something relevant for the user. So from a consumer point of view, it's a topic that negatively affects, for sure, a financial consumer. And we can go beyond the victim of the fraud and refer to the consequences for the entire system. So I think it's a quite interesting area to investigate because there are so many possible effects that are not only related with a single user in a single for a single fraud. The aim of this study is are three different aims. The first one is to identify how much people are able to identify and avoid the fraud. So what is snapshot about the current ability of consumer to avoid a fraud on payment cards. The second aim is to assess the effect on financial literacy on preventing victimization of financial fraud on payment cards. So are the most financial literate individual the one that are more able to detect the fraud or not? And the third point is try to test how much a single one-shot financial education event can improve the ability to identify financial fraud. So if how much financial education can help in dealing with financial scam on cards. The literature is pretty big when we talk about financial fraud, but is quite focused on investment fraud. Shuttle and Peck find that investment fraud victims demonstrate a better understanding on basic financial literacy than no victims. And so he suggests that financial literacy matter when we deal with financial fraud. Similar results has been found by Lokenanen in 2014 on data from tribunal cases from Canada. And you're right to say that those most vulnerable were investors were retired and had limited investment knowledge. So less you know, more likely you are to be a victim of investment fraud. Similar results come from the US with Kiefer and Motola that in 2017 analyzed investment frauds. And what is interesting here is the last point, where higher level of financial literacy is associated with an increased probability of investment fraud victimization. So somehow they suggest, or a possible interpretation is that more you know, more you feel confident about your ability, that can turn into the victimization when you in the use of your payment card. But it's not only studies from the US, because we have even studies from Cyprus and studies on Ponzi scheme, so in different kind of fraud. Engels and all find that financial literacy is relevant in predicting the ability of individuals to detect financial fraud. And other studies, for example, studies from China, analyzing the role of financial education. And Gui, Wang, and Zhao in 2018 find that evaluation of a high-opening financial education program they find that participants have a significant reduction of the tendency to invest in fraudulent products, especially among the most risk-adverse individuals. So financial education seems to work well in helping consumer in dealing in finance. Charity did the same in Indonesia, and you find that financial literacy positively affect the ability to detect scam. On the other side, we have a stream of the literature that analyzes the behavior on the relationship between financial literacy and financial behavior when we deal with credit cards. For example, Rob in 2011 found that an increase in financial literacy increased the likelihood to engage in more responsible credit card use. And Motola investigated the role of financial literacy on the gender gap when we deal with credit cards. But if we have to locate this study, we could say that this is a cross area between the financial fraud studies that has been mainly referred to investment frauds, and the credit card and financial literacy study that didn't investigate yet the case of financial fraud. So that's the location of this study. The study is based on a sample of college students, so 387 senior students from a faculty of economics in a university in central Italy, and it's based on a quasi-experimental approach. So what we have is a pre-test where the entire sample has been exposed to a questionnaire, has been invited to fill a questionnaire with information about their social demographic variable, financial behavior, and financial literacy and fraud literacy. So a stream of questions investigated how much they are able to identify a financial fraud or not. Half of the sample that has been identified randomly has been exposed to a seminar, and after the seminar, both the half of the sample has been invited to fill another questionnaire with financial literacy and financial and fraud literacy question. Everything has been done a few months ago, so in October 2019, and the aim is to see, as we did, how much financial literacy matter when we deal with investment, with payment card fraud. Why college students? College students is always a challenging sample, but the reason why college students has been selected is because I would like to investigate how a sample that should be more prepared than other in dealing with financial fraud is able or not to do well. There are three main reasons why this sample is should be more prepared than other in dealing with the fraud. Is the fact that they are attending university, and we had studies that prove how just the attendance of college tend to improve the output in financial studies, the behavior they are to improve the quality of their financial behavior. They are from a faculty of economics, so they should be even more interested in economics and finance than others. And they are seniors, so they should be exposed to courses like Introduction to Economics, Introduction to Finance, that somehow should make them be more ready to understand the function of a financial product, or just simply more ready to understand the function of the financial markets itself. We have two research questions. The first one is, does financial literacy help individuals to identify and avoid financial fraud related to the use of payment cards? The second one is about financial education, because does one-shot financial education seminar increase the ability of individuals to identify and avoid a financial scam? Just a look to the characteristic of the sample. They are pretty young because they are, of course, college students. Most of them are male, but not in a quite disproportionate manner. Most of them are full-time students, but we have a good representation of other categories like part-time, full-time worker, or freelance that are doing, they are attending college, and at the same time they're working. We investigated the education of parents because it could happen that their ability to do in finance is affected even by the ability of their parents to do well in finance. and education is a proxy of can be a proxy of their financial literacy. If somebody is still living with the parents or not can be relevant, because once you leave the nest, then you need to live by yourself. You must manage your resources, your financial resources by yourself, and this can be a source of learning and even a source of learning about financial frauds. If you're a foreigner, it's the same, and to be foreigner can be even tricky in a different manner, because you have to deal with the financial system that can work differently from the one of your own country, and this can somehow affect your ability to deal with the financial fraud. Your GPA is something that can be useful to consider, to include in the analysis. And the fact that you have been a victim or not in the past is something that can make you be more ready, or somehow more aware about the risk of a fraud victimization. Then we analyze the ownership of payment tools. So more credit card, more debit card you have, more you are at risk, because simply, if you do not have any card, you cannot be victim of any fraud on card. And we investigate even for different payment services like PayPal or SatisPay, or more international famous payment option like Apple Pay or Google Pay. Then we have financial literacy by the Luzardi Mitchell, and we can see that 3.57 is the average score, and is a bit higher than the average when we compare this result with previous studies. We have even 5 items only on the use of cards, and in that case we can see that the result is pretty lower, because only 1.41 correct answer on 5 is the average of that sample. A variable measure the self-assessment of financial literacy, so how much people tend to be confident about their abilities, and we have a mean of 4.34, and from the data we can see like a pretty clear normal distribution. Then we have the financial literacy fraud. This is an example, one of the 20 items we use to assess the ability to detect a fraud or not. This is just an example. You receive an email about an unauthorized uptime to your credit card that has been locked to prevent further issues. In the same email, you find a link to a web page where you can unlock your card by filling in the following information: first name, last name, credit card number, expiration date, and security code. So all the information that a scammer, that the fraudster need to use your card. The possible option you have to answer are these ones. So you can say that there is a risk of fraud. You can say that it's okay, no risk of fraud. Or you can simply say that you don't know. So you are unsure about the situation that looks suspicious, but you are not pretty sure about what's going on. With 20 items, you can have different streams of answer. Sometimes you can provide a wrong answer, and the wrong answer is the one, for example, when there is a fraud, but you say that it's okay. It's a correct answer if there is a fraud and you're able to say that yes, that's a fraud. And the wrong answer is the one when you say that that's a fraud, but it's not. So even when you overweight the risk of fraud in your personal experience. Then you have the case where you don't know. So in that case, you're not sure what's going on. And we can summarize those 20 answers in different manner. The first one is a score that counts the number of right answers, so the number of times that you did well. And we dichotomize everything in a dummy variable that is equal to 1 for the one with a high risk of victimization. So lower is your score, higher is your risk of victimization. But the variable will be equal to 1 if you are at risk. The second score tends somehow to refine this measure, the first measure, by accounting even for penalties anytime you fail an answer. So it's not only the number of times you did well, but account even for the number of times you did not well. You provide the wrong answer. In that case, the score works the same manner. So 1 is equal to the scenario where you have a high risk of victimization. Then a third score is the number of do not know. So the number of times that you say, I don't know if it's a scam or not. And this is something that works like a confident index. So will be equal to 1 for the less confident respondent. It means that more you choose the do not know option, more you are considered like a low confidence individual. Everything was treated in a logistic regression because we have 3 dummy variables, and the control variables were the socio-demographic characteristics. So if you are a full-time student or not, if you live with parents, and so on. The availability of payment tools to check if the fact that more you are engaged with the payment system, more you can be at risk of fraud or not. The financial literacy using the 3 measures, so the Luzardo-Mitchell, the CARD score, and the self-assessment measure, and the risk of and the past experience with fraud in finance, so with financial frauds. What about results? Results say that in the 3 cases, we have, I will just focus on the lower part that is about the financial literacy, so the key research question of the study. When we assess the fraud literacy by the first score, we find a positive effect on financial literacy on the ability to identify the fraud. We are dealing with odds, so any number below 1 is something that decreases the chance to have 1 in your dependent variable. So it means that we are something around 20 to 30% less likely to be victim, to be considered like at a high risk of victimization when you are able to provide correct answer to Luzardo-Mitchell question or the credit card literacy measure. This effect is not anymore so clear when we switch to the second score. That is the one that accounts even for the mistakes in your answer. So in that case, financial literacy is not statistically significant to, and so the hypothesis that financial literacy help you to be more ready in dealing with financial fraud is not supported. And the third score is the one that deal with the number of do not know, so it's the confidence index. Show how more you know, so higher is your score, less is the chance to not be ready. So lower is the number of times that you say do not know. So somehow financial literacy improve your confidence at least in dealing with your credit card. But in that case, self-assessment is something that matters. So this self-assessment of financial literacy and the knowledge on credit card, but not even the Luzardo-Mitchell is a statistical significant variable. What about the second research question? What about financial education? In that case, we use a difference in difference approach where we assessed the gap between the 2 simple, the one that has been exposed to financial education and the one that did not. Difference in terms of their score. So the number of right answer, the sum of points that account for even for the mistakes, and the number of didn't know answer. So we try to assess what is called the intervention effect. Results say that when we deal with the first score, we don't have a statistical significance result. So from a 0 to 20 score, the average was almost the same before the treatment, so before the financial education seminar, and is a bit higher for the treated group. So who attend the seminar tend to be more prepared, but that gap is not statistically significant. So we cannot support the hypothesis that the difference in score is due to the financial education. Similar results is for the second variable. In that case, the no statistical significance and the almost pretty close to zero difference between the treatment group and the control group deny the chance to say that financial education is playing a leading role in that story. In that case, we have just a small results for the number of do not knows, and what came out is that in the post seminar analysis, there is a statistically significant difference between the control group and the treatment group, and the treatment group tend to use the do not know option less than the first one. So we have somehow an evidence of an overconfident of a confidence provided by the financial education. So attending a course, attending a seminar, improve your confidence in dealing with financial fraud. So general conclusion, point number one, we can see that financial literacy helped to identify financial fraud, but only one in the two cases, the variable is statistically significant. So the objective measure like Luzardo Mitchell and credit card literacy or card literacy are relevant to explain your ability to identify the fraud, but we need further investigation because it's significant only one in two cases. Second point, say that financial literacy helped to reduce the number of do not know answers. So we have evidence that increase your ability, your confidence. But if we match the two results, we could say that there is a risk of overconfidence, because a financial education seminar increase your confidence, but doesn't increase as much your ability. So the risk is that you feel more prepared even if you are not so more prepared than others. Conclusion number three say that even if we are dealing with somehow top level participants that are supposed to be more prepared than others, only half of the respondents risk to be victimized in around 50% of the cases. So even those sample that is supposed to be better than other in dealing with frauds is not performing pretty well. So the risk of victimization is pretty high even in that case. The last point about financial education, we say that the single standalone seminar doesn't work, because the only effect we have is an effect on confidence, but we do not find a clear evidence on knowledge. In that case, additional analysis can be useful to figure out why we do not have this effect. It could be something related with the topic of the seminar, the length of the seminar, or the fact that we are starting from a level of financial literacy that is above the average, so the marginal increase cannot be so high to find a statistically significant result. So we have some results that are somehow interesting, but probably there is room for additional studies in that area. That's it. Thank you for your attention, and those are my contacts. If you are interested, or if you want to share some comments, I will be pretty happy to receive by mail. Thanks.